So our first presenter this evening is Julie. She's with the Colorado Department of Agriculture, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about egg and slaughter regulation regarding poultry and some things for that. So Julie, we'll let you go ahead and get started. If you want to share your screen, or we can share ours, however that works for you.
You bet. So good afternoon, good evening, actually. Thanks for having me. While I'm sharing my screen, I won't be able to see if someone has a question. So sorry, I'm clicking through looking for my screen share as I'm talking.
You're fine, Julie. We'll monitor the chat for you too if there's questions that come through.
That would be great.
Mm-hmm.
One second. And here we go. Get my face out of there. All right. Does this screen look okay? I know we've got all this at top.
Looks fine. Yep.
All right. All right. So we're going to talk about the regulations regarding selling eggs and poultry processing and selling your poultry after it's been processed. This information is intended for very small flock egg and poultry producers in the state of Colorado. And by very small flock, we need egg producers that sell less than 250 dozen eggs per month, or poultry producers that process less than 1,000 birds per year. If you go over those limits, you're no longer considered very small. You're still small, but not very small. We'll talk about eggs first, and they can come from chicken, ducks, turkey, quails, and guinea hens. So poultry species cover all of those domestic birds, not just chickens. A lot of people say, do I need a license? You will need an egg dealer license if you want to sell your eggs to a retail store. All right, our licenses are active for a calendar year, January 1st through December 31st. And the first time you get one, you'll fill out the paper form and mail it in. I have included a link to that paper form in this PowerPoint, so you should be able to get it from the recording. If you sell your eggs directly to the consumer, you do not need a license. Direct to consumer is the person who's going to ultimately eat the eggs, use them for cooking, baking. You can sell them directly from your home. You can sell them at a farmer's market or another agreed upon place of delivery. A lot of kids in my neighborhood bring them to church and sell them to other people at church. The people that buy your eggs, the consumer, may not resell the eggs. So this is for unlicensed small flock egg dealers. No license required if it's direct to the consumer. Packaging, I really don't like this up here. I don't know if I can move it over here. Packaging, the eggs have to be placed in clean cartons. You should not be reusing cartons. I know that's kind of against popular practice, but the regulations do say the eggs must be placed in clean cartons, and you cannot have other producers' information on your carton. So if you're reusing cartons from Safeway or Walmart or Kroger, it's going to have their producer's information on it and not yours. So that's one of the reasons. So clean cartons and unlabeled cartons. So the cartons have to be labeled with your producer name, your address, and it can be just city, state, and zip. You don't have to list your full street address. The date you pack those eggs into the carton, and it must include the following statement on your cartons. The safe handling instructions to prevent illness from bacteria, keep eggs refrigerated, cook eggs until yolks are firm, and cook any foods containing eggs thoroughly. These eggs do not come from a government-approved source. This exact wording in the quotations does need to be on your cartons. As a small flock egg dealer, you do not have to Label your cartons with the size and grade. So you don't need A large or B medium. You're exempt from that part of the regulation. And moving, there it goes. This word that's hidden up here says washing. So persons who produce and sell eggs at a farmer's market must comply with the following requirements to wash and sanitize. And there's information here. You have to use potable water. You can use an unscented dishwashing liquid. Your water temperature needs to be a minimum of 110 degrees Fahrenheit. And you should not allow your eggs to soak in the wash water. After they've been washed, you can sanitize with a dip or a spray of chlorine bleach, 1 ounce to a gallon of water. If you don't like using bleach, some people do not, you can use a 3% hydrogen peroxide solution. So even though eggs sold from your home are not required to be washed, it is recommended that they be washed. Storage and transportation. Eggs have to be stored at a temperature range between 41 and 33. So when you're storing them in your refrigerator, they have to be a minimum, a maximum of 41, no more than 41, but no less than 33, or they're going to freeze. Transportation, you're given a little bit more leeway. So if you're transporting them to a farmer's market or to another place of delivery, you are allowed to allow the temperature to go as high as 45 degrees. Okay. So that was a quick rundown on the egg regulations. I'm going to go ahead and pause here and see if there's any questions regarding eggs specifically. Not hearing any, so we'll go move on to poultry processing. Again, the poultry species are chicken, duck, turkey, quail, and guinea hens. Do you need a license to process poultry and sell your birds? You do if you want to sell your birds to a retail food establishment. Again, the license are calendar year, January through December. Again, there's a paper form to fill out for your initial license. Once you have that initial license, you'll be given an online account and you can renew it annually online. Here's a link to the application for a meat processor. It's called Custom Exempt Meat Processor License. It's the same license that people who do other domestic livestock, cows, chickens, cows, goats, sheep. Same license, but you'll choose the poultry option. You do not need a meat processor license if you process less than 1,000 birds per year and you sell your poultry directly to the consumer. Again, if you want to expand your sales and go into retail, you will need to be licensed. If you're going direct to consumer, less than 1,000 birds a year, you do not need a license. Again, you can direct to consumer can be a farmer's market. And just like eggs, this meat from your poultry processing may not be resold. The Colorado Revised Statute 3533-107 outlines this. It says the producer who raises and slaughters no more than 1,000 poultry during each calendar year is exempt from the provisions of this article being 3533, other than the record keeping and the labeling requirements. If you follow these 4 things, the producer does not buy or sell poultry products other than those produced from poultry raised on the producer's own farm. That means you're not purchasing somebody else's birds, or you're not purchasing whole birds and then further processing them into other products to sell. You're only dealing with the birds that you have purchased on your farm. This doesn't mean if your birds are not ready to be processed, you can't go to Walmart and pick up your own chicken to consume in your household. That's not what that's talking about. That's talking about you buying other chicken, perhaps a USDA processed carcass that you want to further process into other cuts. So if you want to remain unlicensed, you cannot buy and sell other poultry products. You are exempt from licensing if the poultry do not move in interstate commerce, meaning you cannot sell it across state lines. The poultry are properly labeled, and we're going to go through that. And the poultry are healthy when slaughtered, and the slaughter and processing are conducted under sanitary standards, practices, and procedures that produce poultry products that are sound, clean, and fit for use as human food. So your two requirements, if you remember, are record keeping and labeling. So the records for each customer transaction must include, you need all of this information, the date the poultry was slaughtered, the date of the sale, the name and address of the buyer. So it's not enough just to get a name and address of the buyer. The description of the poultry processed, including species and quantity. 1 duck, 3 guinea hens, 1 turkey, 15 chickens, that type of thing. Name and address of the processor, that's you. Again, city, state, and zip is fine. And you have to keep your records for 2 years. Why are we keeping records? So that is so we can trace back the product in the event of a foodborne illness. So this is one of the requirements of the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. When we were formulating regulations, we had quite a few discussions with them, and that was one of their big items was traceability of this poultry product that is processed in an unlicensed facility, so that it can be traced back in the event of a foodborne illness. Now let's go over some labeling requirements. It's pretty extensive, so you're going to want to probably refer back to these slides or look at the resources that were made available, the poultry rules, because labeling is pretty extensive and there are some very specific language you have to use. So the poultry producers must label the poultry with the following information: a description of the poultry, including species and quantity, 1 chicken or 4 chicken legs, that type of thing, a pack or processing date, the name and address of the producer, that's you, and again, city, state, and zip, and 3 statements must appear on the label. I put them in parentheses, quotation marks here. These are exact statements that have to appear on your label. This poultry was produced in a facility that is not subject to licensure or inspection. This product is not intended for resale. Exempt-P.L.90-492. That refers to the Federal Poultry Inspection Act. So you are telling your customers that this bird is exempt from the federal poultry inspection. And you also need a safe handling instruction statement. Has to be exactly as worded here. You've all seen that in poultry in the grocery store. So this safe handling instruction has to appear on your label. Quite a bit of things on the label. Where can you sell your poultry? Or how can you sell your poultry? Let's move that guy out of the way. So you can sell your poultry as a whole bird or one that is broken down into consumer cuts. And it can be boned meat, breast, thighs, legs. You can have the skin removed. A lot of people mistakenly believe that unlicensed poultry processors can only sell whole birds, but that is a misconception. The rules actually allow for consumer cuts to also be sold. The biggest thing is you're selling direct to the consumer, though. Unless you're licensed, then you can go into retail markets. What do you do with the waste, your carcasses? So waste in the industry, we call this inedible product. It can be disposed of to a licensed rendering company. Sanitation landfill, this is the most common area. Sanitation landfill, that's your local trash company that picks it up. It can be composted, subject to approval by county or state health agency. And it can be buried on site, again, subject to approval by county or state health agency. So one thing I do want to talk about now is prior to disposal, you want to store that inedible product in such a manner that it will not be accessible to wild birds or other animals that can spread contamination through it. This is doubly important right now with the high path avian influenza outbreak that our country is experiencing. This is one of the routes of spreading. Wild birds get into your chicken's feed or your chicken's pen, or they'll get into this inedible product, peck on it, and then travel it to the next farm over. So it's really important to guard that and treat that, kind of safeguard it so no other pests or especially wild birds can get into it. All right. That is the quick rundown on the eggs and poultry processing regulations. And what kind of questions do you have for me?
Julie, this is Andrea Jeter down in Southwest Colorado. I do have a couple of just clarification questions. We get a lot of phone calls about the egg portion of things.
Okay.
And I noticed one of the things that you talked about was the difference in washing eggs between farmers markets, needing them to be washed, and if they are directly sold off of your farm, they do not have to be washed. Is that correct?
Correct. It's a must requirement at a farmer's market. It's optional if it's direct off your farm. However, we do recommend it.
Okay. And then I saw in the alternate list you had the hydrogen peroxide. Vinegar is not a substitute, correct?
It has not been listed as a substitute in our regulations, no. If you can provide some scientific proof that it sanitizes, then it would actually, we could discuss that on a case-by-case basis.
Perfect. Those are questions that we get a lot in our extension office. The other thing I have for you is when you're talking about the licensing for over that 250 dozen a month, and even in going into the meat part of things, you talked about that there were forms that needed to be filled out. Mm-hmm. One of the questions that we get a lot is, are there inspections that take place on farms that go along with that?
If you are a licensed poultry processor, the answer to that is yes, you will be inspected by a Colorado Department of Agriculture meat inspector. They will come in and look at sanitation issues and your record keeping. If you are a small flock poultry egg dealer, small flock egg dealer, you can be inspected, although at this point in time, we do not have the staff to cover all of the small flock egg dealers, so we are not inspecting those. Can't say that we never will, but at this point in time, we are not.
Sure. Perfect. And while I'm unmuted, we actually do have a question in the chat also that says, why do you recommend washing the eggs? It removes the bloom and opens the egg up to contaminations. I think that's a frequent question that we all get.
It is a frequent question. I hear it often. And from a personal standpoint, I'm on the fence. I can go either way. From a regulatory standpoint, I have to point you back to the rule and say, the rule is the rule and we have to follow it. And it says we have to wash the eggs. So I understand and I agree that it removes some of the natural barrier to contamination to that egg. However, our rules state that they have to be washed when they're offer to a broader audience than just your neighbor, which is generally off the farm. So there's another link in this PowerPoint to the website, the Colorado Department of Agriculture website. If you want to get to the egg and meat program, choose the ICS banner and then click on the egg program or the meat program. If you want to talk for a minute about the HPAI, then also if you click on that Colorado Department of Agriculture link, and I'm going to go ahead and do that and see if you can follow me. Click on the animals in this drop down. And if you scroll down to the bottom of this page, it'll say latest Animal Health Division news. Select that. And then there will be a lot of information on this website on the HPAI, as well as, where did I see that? I need to check here. Yes, so click on that first one. And down here, there's some links to USDA Defend the Flock and a biosecurity toolkit that will give you specific things that you can do to protect your backyard flocks and to protect your birds. All right, does that help? I know the state vet's office was going to talk more on this, and they were not able to be here because they were responding to an outbreak. But if you follow these links, you'll get a lot of good information. As far as live bird movement, let's see, how do I get out of this? I know that they have issued a moratorium on or emergency suspension for bird shows and other things like that. I don't know what they call them. Sorry, I'm not an animal person. After they get slaughtered, I'll talk to you. So, but yeah, go to that website and follow the links for the HPAI. All right, thank you all. Now, if you all have any more questions, I'd be happy to talk to you.
Our next part of the presentation is going to host Martha Solons. Martha is with our CSU Extension on-campus department, and she's going to talk to you about marketing and kind of some business basics regarding poultry and all of those things. So Martha, I'll let you take it from there.
Great, thank you so much, and good evening to everybody. I'm just going to share my screen here. And give me just a second to get it loaded up the right way. Okay, so hopefully there you can see the right view. Is that all good? All right, awesome. Well, thanks everybody for joining us this evening. This is, I'm sure, just overall, poultry is a great topic. So I'm glad that we get the chance to talk through, how might you sell your product and to whom? So that's really what I'm going to cover tonight. So, the first thing I want to talk about is, we need some kind of basic information before you start thinking about market outlets and, how much you're going to sell your products for, whether they're eggs or meat. And to whom you're going to sell those products. So, this is some of the information that I would like to cover is what I consider this real, foundational information to help you if you're considering or are building a poultry-based business, or you're just kind of experimenting with, what does it look like if I sell my products from my farm at a farmer's market. Just can I develop a viable business or at least an income stream from this? So regardless, they're just these basics that we want to be able to go over. So, the first thing is knowing what it costs you to produce your product. And so if that's a dozen eggs that Julie talked about in your new carton, or if it's a broiler, your meat bird, you want to know what it costs you to produce that product. And so to do that, one thing I'm going to share with you all is a budget that we did through Extension, and it's got several tabs on it. And what I'll do is I'll make that available to the team here that's producing this series for you, and you can get access to it and use it. So you can use that, or you can look around for other budgets, or you can just start keeping track of your own costs and just start your own record keeping, because that is really important for knowing exactly what it's costing you to produce your product. And the one thing I would just say is, don't forget to keep track of your own labor too, because that is an expense also. So this is an example. This is part of that spreadsheet that I was talking about. And so what I did is I clipped little pieces of it. And so this is the tab that looks at producing and marketing eggs. And so it's got a bunch of different sections to it. So I'm just going to walk you through a couple of those so that you can get a sense of how, the kind of information ultimately you want to get. So that first arrow on the top shows you your gross revenues. So gross sales, how much money you're going to make overall from, each dozen eggs, for example. And I cut off a column just to make it not so busy. The next set with the brackets there shows you all of your costs of producing that dozen eggs, or the costs of keeping that bird to produce the dozen eggs. So those are all of those variable expenses, and so those are going to change depending on how many birds you're keeping, how productive they are, and I'll show you some of the other things that we might want to consider. Then that next arrow down says net cash receipts from operations. So that's after you cover those variable costs. Then, you have, so we started out with per dozen eggs, $5.15 per dozen eggs. Now we're down to, we take out those variable costs and we're down to $1.31. So then, we want to look at some of those things that are really fundamental to your farm or your business. And that could be your land lease, those capital assets, things like your barns, depreciable type items. And then, by the time we take that out, then that shows us what your returns are going to be for that dozen eggs or per bird over the year. So this is an annual budget. So that's kind of the summary page, but what we have to do first is figure out, well, wow, there are some different parameters that we want to think about. And so the first thing we want to do is look at what the flock size of laying hens is ultimately going to be. And so this is all totally, you can populate this with your own information depending on how big your operation is and how many birds you're keeping. The mortality rate is going to depend on breed and a lot of other conditions. And so, this just gives you some cells that you can put in, for example, when they start laying, how long they might lay during the year, your first year, your second year, and then we're considering, at the end of that second year that they're spent hens. And so then this gives you the total number of eggs that you would produce in 1 year. And so that number actually falls below that figure that Julie gave you of 250 dozen per month. And so we're below that at that level. So that puts us at a small flock level. Now this is, I know it's lots of numbers, but I did just want to show you some of the information that you could add in here. So the first thing is how you're selling those eggs. And so, maybe you're selling some retail and you're getting a higher price of $5 a dozen. Maybe you're selling some wholesale and, you're getting $3 a dozen. So, this obviously is kind of treading then into the category of not being, if we're selling wholesale, then we're looking at a different category. But then we've also got revenues from those spent hens. So again, just to illustrate, the prices may not be what you would receive. The costs in here may not be, this one is a couple years old, so everything's gone up. So, we'd want to adjust these costs. But feed is obviously going to be one of your biggest costs. So you'd want to put in your scratch or starter feed. and your layer feed and anything else that you're feeding those birds. And then you've got your any kind of medical costs that you might have, and then other supplies. And so then those are our, just some of those important variable costs. So then the next thing I wanted to do was walk you through the same exercise for meat birds. And again, this one shows you your gross revenue per bird. And so maybe you're selling those whole birds at around $16 on average per bird. So I've seen it, here along the Front Range. I've definitely seen some pretty heady prices for a whole bird. So then that next section is going to show you all of those costs of raising that bird. And so then, we've got our subtotal here of those variable expenses. So you can see that's a really big portion. The cost of raising that bird is, it's a large percentage of what you're making. So, your net receipts are pretty small. And again, this is just an example. As you scale this up, you may find that your returns look different. But in general, from what I've seen from small scale producers, is that the returns for egg production are greater. So it's a more profitable business than meat birds at a smaller scale. And this particular budget, as you'll see when I flip to the next slide, or the slide after this, does incorporate taking those birds to a processor. And so it doesn't include, processing at your own operation, which would take out transportation and the costs of processing. So these are, similar to that other budget that I showed you. Then here are those parameters that you can put in. So, how many young birds are you buying in? What's the mortality rate? What's your average flock size? How many do you lose before you take them to be processed, and what's the average weight? This is for, a quicker growing breed, but it could be, maybe you're raising a heritage chicken. And so, that number of weeks to harvest weight could be a lot longer, could be, 15 weeks, for example. So then your feed costs are certainly going to look different too. So this is pretty small, but again, I just did want to show you, how you might calculate the revenues. So maybe you're selling, most of them then of those 88 chickens that you end up harvesting, maybe most of those are going into whole birds, but then you've got some that you're selling cut up. And there's, so you can add that pricing information in. So then, your feed costs, and then again, those medical costs, poultry supplies. And then down here, I did want to talk about those marketing costs. And so again, if you're, we've got processing in there as a marketing cost, because that could be really important for the type of market channel that you want to access. So maybe, you're selling to a wholesaler and they're only going to take poultry that's been through a USDA inspected plant. And so that's going to increase those marketing costs too. So in general, just kind of to summarize there, and again, I'll make all of that Excel budget available to you guys to experiment with and just see. But, some of the things that are going to influence your production costs are the breed of either, laying hen or broiler that you're raising, the type of feed that you're going to use. We see a lot of interest in like non-soy, non-GMO feeds. There are some markets where consumers are really interested in knowing that it's the chickens have not been fed any kind of a soy-based feed or a feed containing soy. So that really raises those feed costs. And then, of course, you've got all of those marketing costs depending on how you're processing your chickens, your meat birds, your transportation to get them to a processor. So we don't have a lot of poultry processors in Colorado. And then the other thing that I wanted to talk about are programs that might be of interest that help you set your product apart in the marketplace. And so those are like certification programs. And I've seen all different scales of producers look at, adopting a certification program. So like animal welfare approved, humane raised, just something that where they feel like that really resonates with their customers. And there's been a huge interest in humane treatment of animals, and just knowing from birth all the way through to slaughter, and through to slaughter, how those how those animals were raised. And so there's a lot of interest in these types of certifications, and I think there's a lot of market potential. But the thing to keep in mind is that really can change the cost structure of your business too. So while it may garner you some customers, there are these costs that come along with those benefits too. So, this just gives you an idea of a couple of those types of certification programs. They all look different. They all have different standards for, how those animals are, what they're to be fed, how they're to be housed and handled and everything. And then this just gives you a sense, it could be the amount of outdoor access. It could be, how you manage bedding and everything, the type of space that each bird has, how much of a rest period that they have, and then, how you manage the capture and transportation of those animals. And there's definitely more than that, but that's just to give you a sense of some of the things that you need to weigh. Is the cost of participating in one of those programs versus how much more you might be able to get for your eggs or for your whole or cut up birds by being in that program. The other thing that we see a lot of interest in now, and these are just two that might pertain, but there's so, as you guys have probably seen, there are so many free from labels now. And so as consumers become a lot more discriminating about what is an ingredient or what has been consumed by the food that they're eventually consuming, we see a lot of free from type labels. And so, that's just another area where, if you can talk about what the feed is, what the feeding regime was, then that also is has an entire consumer segment that's very interested in that, as well as, just knowing that those animals were, that poultry was raised and maybe slaughtered on your farm. So that, origin of that meat is important too. So knowing that that's not it's a local product is really, really important to some folks. So we'll kind of circle back to that in a minute, but so, that kind of brings us back to, so, we've talked about some of the factors that influence your cost of production. Well, then how do you think about pricing your meat, chicken, or your eggs? And so there are kind of three big buckets of ways that we might look at this. And one is purely based on your cost of production, making sure you cover your cost of production. The other is looking at what other folks in the marketplace are pricing their, same or similar products, and maybe what your customers are willing to pay. So no one approach is right, but what this, thinking about this really critically then helps you narrow down a price that, is going to best fit both your product as well as the market that you're in. And I'll give you some examples of that. And so, that cost-based pricing is really should be kind of the baseline for you, and you don't want to just cover your cost of production, because you want to think about, okay, I want to make some profit from this. If you're doing this as a business, you want to at least break even and have money to do other things with, maybe reinvest in your business. So, knowing what your costs are is a good starting point, and then really looking at what the costs of being in each of those markets are. So selling eggs from your farm looks really different from the costs of selling eggs from a farmer's market. And so you need, Julie talked about refrigeration. You've got to keep your eggs at a certain temperature during transportation. You've got to pay all those market fees if you're at a farmer's market versus if you're, selling them off of your own operation. Your cost structure is going to look really different. So, just thinking about that too. So this little table at the bottom is for some maybe some turkeys here. We've got 20-pound turkeys. This is an operation that's raising 100 birds, and so you can see from this this little chart here, we can tell of all the money that you make, how much is going to cover those costs of production, how much then is left over to cover your fixed costs, and then what is your net profit, and what's your profit, your net profit margin on that. You can break that down in different ways, either as percentage of your total sales. You can look at it as, per bird, per turkey that you're raising, or per pound. And you can even use that to do like what we call a sensitivity analysis. And so, say you want to increase your profit margin. So that means somewhere, either you're going to have to increase your prices or decrease your costs somewhere. So you're going to be able to decrease those fixed costs, maybe not, maybe, what you have to cover to support that, your chicken enterprise, as well as your other farming enterprises, that's what you have. Maybe it's your cost of production that can change. So, just a little bit of a strategy for thinking about that cost-based pricing. So another way is to, look at what your competitors are doing. And we see a lot of this in farmers markets where vendors try to, undercut other vendors, not in a like, I guess, like, in a bad way, but just they're trying to, get more of what they consider the market share. But what they're doing then by setting their price lower is, while they may, create a little bit more demand there, it's really hard to increase your prices when you start low. So, there are different strategies for doing this, but you could look at your competitors' prices as being, okay, this is, what everybody's selling their eggs for $5 a dozen, or everybody's selling their meat birds, their whole birds for, $10 a bird or something. And so, you could come in at that price, or, to kind of create that that aura of there's value to my product. My product is, I can set it apart in the marketplace because it's got these particular attributes. You can set your prices higher. And so that's what, we kind of call skimming. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, because there are people who will see high, associate a higher price with a higher quality product. So, and if it's too high, people won't buy it. And then, you came in, at the wrong price. So then, the last thing that we want to talk about is maybe pricing by, trying to understand what your consumers are willing to pay. And some of that, might come about in the market where, you say, okay, I am going to price my eggs at $6 a dozen, and maybe they're multicolored, and you can talk about how you raise those laying hens, and why they are so delicious and why people should buy them. And so you're appealing to the values of your customers. And I've seen people in farmers markets bring binders that show exactly how they raise their livestock. And, it really allows the customer to start creating a relationship with the seller, with the operator. And so it starts to create that kind of, brand loyalty. Even you get people who really identify with what you're doing and feel like, those are the eggs, or those are that's the chicken that they want to come and purchase every time. So, just kind of wrapping up here, a big piece is, then figuring out who your customers are. And, it really depends on, of course, what your marketplace looks like, along the front range and closer into like Denver, Boulder, Fort Collins, the prices are a lot higher, and, the consumers are going to be willing to pay more for a dozen eggs or a meat bird. Well, maybe in your area, that's not what's going to happen. And so, your typical customer is going to be your neighbor. And so, if you put on if you think of this through the lens of your, feeding people in your area, then, you're looking at, okay, pricing so that your neighbors can afford your product. And then you really understand what their values are too, really good, affordable food. Maybe they're looking for consistency. They're not looking for anything fancy, but you really need to figure this out and really understand who your customers are and, how their values align with what you're producing. So some colleagues of mine did a large survey 2 years ago. The results came out last year. And one of the things that they asked is, how did you find a new farmer food business? And so this word cloud shows you, how people often find out about food in, their local area, how they find out about a business. So a lot of it really is word of mouth. And so it's, knowing that Grace has some amazing eggs, or her chickens are the best in the world. So there's word of mouth, hearing something through family, maybe seeing a sign. So a lot of it is, more informal than you might think. And then also, of course, the role of social media is really important. And you can do so much with a pretty little investment, and you can start to, really identify who your customers are by using social media too. So just a couple of examples, you can help people feel like, they should be coming to the farmer's market to buy your product, by just doing some really good posts. These are some Instagram, just some screenshots of different businesses from Instagram, and you can get so creative and, really help people understand what it is you're selling, and start to create this demand for your product. And it is obviously not a very expensive way to promote your product. Here are a couple of Facebook posts. I don't know if any of you know Corner Post Meats, but they do a great job. With Facebook, they do a lot of videos and a lot of, just really getting out regularly in front of consumers. So they have a really broad consumer base. And then there are other Facebook pages that are kind of good for posting if you're trying to go maybe outside of your local area. And so frequently, like in that U.S. meat and produce market, you'll see South Dakota or Nebraska or Wyoming. There are meat producers primarily we see meat producers on there. And then Shop Colorado Farms is another one that can help you find some new customers too. So, those are both groups you have to join, but they can be a really great way to promote your product. And then I've seen a lot of activity on Nextdoor. So particularly if you're just trying to, reach your area, however big or small that is, Nextdoor can be a really great way to, just help to define and promote to customers in your area. So, then just the last thing is, always thinking about, how your production is going to influence your marketing decisions. And so, making sure that the breed you choose is going to be appropriate for what you're going to be selling. And then, just making sure that you have the infrastructure near you to, for example, if you're raising meat birds, that if you're not going to be processing them on farm, then that you have some place to take them that's not going to be, 200 miles away or something. And then, of course, really identifying who your target customers are before you even, raise one bird, because that's really important. You want to know who's going to be buying your product before you start raising it. And then the last thing, we're all really aware of that highly pathogenic avian influenza. So biosecurity is really important, but thinking about, food safety and biosecurity, taking a class in HACCP, just really thinking about, how can you grow the safest product, how can you raise the safest product possible for your consumers. And Julie had referred to that too, but I think that that is really important, because that's just one more way to help your customers realize that you're taking their health and welfare very, very seriously. And we see more people asking questions about food safety too. So that is that, and hopefully I didn't go on too long. But I will stop sharing my screen then and see what kind of questions we have.
Martha,
Yeah.
if people are interested in, especially in the farmers market side of things, do you have some good recommendations for them as far as where they should get connected, or who might be a good resource to get off on the right foot for that?
Sure. Yeah, the Colorado Farmers Market Association has a lot of really good resources. And so, if they're, new to the farmers market, sales, I think looking at what's online, there's a lot of really good like vendor coaching online. And that can really kind of set you up for success. We have a website called cofarmtomarket.com that has some really good information if you're looking at a product and trying to figure out what sales channel is going to be maybe the most appropriate one for you. It lays out the regulations, licensing, taxation that you might need to consider for each of those market channels. So it goes through, oh, there you go. Thanks, Callie. It goes through everything from, selling off of your own operation to, selling it to distribution or to institutions. So, and then I guess just to, the other thing is too, is if you're interested in a farmer's market before you become a vendor, go and check it out and see who the customers are, what the pricing structure is, what products are there, do they already have, is there already an egg vendor? Are you going to be the fourth one or something, just kind of checking out the marketplace before you make that commitment.
So last speaker this evening is Brent Young. He's also with CSU Extension and the Ag Business Management kind of regional specialist. And he's going to talk a little bit, kind of carry on what Martha generally discussed, and talking about financing your poultry operation and some of the resources that are available for that. So again, if you guys have questions as he goes along, we can throw them in the chat, and Brent will let you get started.
So as Christine mentioned, I'm a member of the Agriculture and Business Management team. I'm a regional extension specialist. My office is in Sterling, and I'm really excited to be with you tonight and share a few ideas with you. I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm actually a member of a third generation irrigated farm north of Sterling. We raise soybeans. This is actually my grandson, Aiden. This was taken, I believe, in 2015. We had a really nice soybean crop, and we were out one afternoon checking a center pivot sprinkler, and Aiden was, as grandsons tend to do from time to time, was getting on my nerves a little bit. So I said, hey, listen, if you can go out in the field and find a 4-bean pod, I'll buy you a soda pop. Thinking that'd take him 10 or 15 minutes and I would finish what I was doing and would go on. Well, it was a really good crop that year, so it took him all of about 5 minutes. So, but anyway, so we have soybeans. We raise alfalfa. That's Aiden again on the swather this last summer. Sugar beets in rotation, and then corn. And our most important crop is our grandkids. In my other job, as I mentioned, I'm a regional extension specialist. Area of specialty is agriculture and business management. My office is in Sterling, 304 Main. If you're familiar with the city of Sterling, this office is right across the street from the Logan County Courthouse. And so my major responsibility is to help farmers and ranchers manage risk. And those of us that are involved in agriculture know that farming and ranching is a very risky business. And those people that tend to be successful are those who can manage that risk. And so that's what I strive to do. I would encourage you to find our CSU ABM website. If you use Google or whatever your preferred search engine, if you'll just search CSU ABM, typically it's the first or second hit. I would encourage you to find the website and bookmark it, because hopefully it'll be one that you'll want to go back to time and time again. And I'm going to actually share with you some Excel spreadsheets tonight that are from the website. So you can access everything that I'm going to introduce you to tonight on that website. So again, find it, bookmark it. I think it's provides you with a lot of really, really good information. So I want to talk about a few ways that you can fund small-scale poultry operations. I want to talk about two programs in particular, because I think they have some real merit for people who are looking at a smaller scale operation. And in fact, I think both of these programs are really tailor-made for small scale poultry operations, although you can use the funds in the program for numerous types of production operations. I think they really fit small scale poultry quite well. So the first one I want to talk about is from the USDA, United States Department of Agriculture, Farm Service Agency Microloan Program. And so this is a program that you can borrow up to $100,000, $50,000 for actual farm ownership, and $50,000 for operating. In terms of security requirements, if you're looking at farm ownership, you can get a loan that's 100% of the value of that farm, which is quite unusual from a lending standpoint. Typically, a lender might loan you 60% loan to value, 70% loan to value, but this loan could be for 100% of the value of the farm, meaning that you wouldn't have to come up with a down payment. And then when you talk about the operating, be that equipment, be it annual operating costs like feed, for example, they can actually go up to 150% of 100 to 150 set asset to loan value. So it may be a situation where you do have to have some assets available. In other cases, they'll loan you 100% of the assets. Very good terms. If you're looking at a land ownership loan, those can be set up for as many as 25 years. The normal operating loan is up to 12 months. But if you're borrowing money to purchase equipment, that can be financed for up to 7 years. A really great rate. The last posted rate that I could find online was as of March 24th of this year. And as you can see, just slightly over 2.3% interest. So that's really great. A very simplified application process. And one little caveat, you are required to have some prior agriculture experience, but there's a number of ways you can meet that requirement. If you've had some formalized training at the post-secondary level in agriculture, that might qualify. Maybe you've worked as a farmhand for a neighbor or someone else, that may qualify as well. And so there are numerous ways that you can fulfill that requirement. So a good program, one that certainly I'd recommend you take a look at. Another program, and this is through the Farm Credit System. So the Farm Credit System is a series of lending institutions across the country that are somewhat unique. They're kind of the credit union of agriculture. As a borrower in a farm credit system, you actually become a member of your local farm credit bank. And so you have stock in the system. The banks are operated by members, and the federal government provides a special line of credit for the farm credit system. And so farm credit system banks have a young and beginning and small farmer loan program. The details vary from location to location, so I don't have the specific details down, but just as that microloan program with Farm Service Agency, the terms are better. Typically, the loan applications are a little bit more abbreviated. And so again, they're really designed for people that are trying to get established or expand a small operation. In Colorado, we have 3 farm credit system banks. We have American Ag Credit, which is some of the Front Range counties plus the West Slope. We have Premier Farm Credit, which is primarily the northeastern corner of Colorado. And then finally, the Farm Credit system of Southern Colorado. So let's talk a little bit about what you're going to have to pull together if you're going to apply for a loan. And certainly the 2 loans that I've just recently talked about, that microloan program and the Young Beginning and Small Farm program with the Farm Credit System, you're going to have to pull together some information. Most applications will pull information from 2 primary sources, a balance sheet and an income statement. If you have an operation currently that you are working with, currently established, and you want to expand that, then certainly you're going to want to provide some information from an income statement that reflects the income potential and the actual income of the operation that you are operating or are currently managing. If you're looking at starting an operation from scratch, then typically that income statement is a pro forma statement, or a statement looking at what you anticipate as you establish the business. Typically, if in addition to buying land or buying equipment, you also want to put together an operating loan, a loan whereby you can borrow money for production expenses. One of the things that we find is a challenge in most agriculture is our businesses tend to have some issues with liquidity, meaning that we don't typically have income coming in at all times, but we have expenses that are ongoing. And so many times, in order to have the money necessary to operate the business, we have to borrow money. And so you may also be required to provide a cash flow statement. So the good news I have for you tonight, as I mentioned earlier, our ABM website has information to help you develop the financial documents. And they're all Excel-based spreadsheets. They do all the math for you, so they're really quite helpful in going through this process. So if you're looking for those Excel spreadsheets, again, this is a screenshot of our ABM website. And so first, what you would want to do is click on that lower box that's in the lower right-hand side of the screen where it says New Decision Tools. If you click on that, then the photo on the home site will change to what you see here. And then you see the second box that says click here. You click on that, and that'll take you to these decision tools. The next screen will take you right to them. So let's talk first about the balance sheet. And again, you may not have to submit a balance sheet, but you're most likely going to submit information in a loan application that originates from a balance sheet. So what I really recommend you do is put together the balance sheet to begin with. And as we go through how this tool works, I think you'll see some real benefit in developing the balance sheet using this Excel spreadsheet first, and then transferring the information from the balance sheet to your loan application. I know it sounds like kind of a complex process, but hopefully as you'll see the spreadsheet and how this works, you'll understand the benefit. So basically the financial sheet and its statement in its basic form, it's just a snapshot of the financial condition of your business. I like to tell people another way to look at a balance sheet is it is the annual checkup for your business. Typically, balance sheets are conducted once a year. We try to do them at about the same time every year. And again, it's like that annual physical that we might do with our physician to find out what our level of health is. And so basically what it's going to show us is what the business owns, what the assets are of that business, what are the liabilities or what we owe, and then owner equity or net worth, which would be the difference between what we owe and what we own. And so what do we have left? If we were to take all of our assets and liquidate all of those and pay off all of the bills, what would we have left? So that would be our net worth. And sometimes because of the fact that we determine net worth, you may hear a balance sheet called a net worth statement. And so I've got some screenshots here. I'm going to apologize, they're a little small. Again, to try to get one screenshot on the entire page kind of made that a little bit difficult. But all of the decision aids that I'm going to present to you tonight start off with an Excel sheet that's an input. And so on this sheet, you input information about date, the name of your farm and ranch. For this particular balance sheet, we want to give you an opportunity to tell us what kind of a business legal entity are you? Are you a sole proprietorship? Are you a limited liability corporation? How is your business organized? And then also, as you can see, an opportunity to list all of the owners of the business and either the percent ownership they have or the total number of shares within the business that they might have available. And then as you can see at the bottom of the screen, there are several other Excel worksheets that you have available. Now, one of the things I really like about this balance sheet, and it's one that we actually use, and so part of the reason that I spent a few minutes at the beginning of the presentation this evening letting you know that I'm part of an actual agricultural operation is we actually use these tools. And so this isn't just an academic exercise for me. I'm actually providing for you and recommending that you use tools that I personally use and I think have been very beneficial to our operation. So this is a pretty cool balance sheet. It allows you to put together a balance sheet strictly of the farm and ranch related assets or strictly of your personal assets, or you can do a combined balance sheet, which would then combine both the business and personal assets. So I think that's a real plus with this particular tool, the ability to do that. So the way this thing works is every one of those individual worksheets is a series of schedules. And this is where you actually put your information. You don't put anything directly into the balance sheet. In fact, the balance sheets are password protected, self protected. You can't put information there. So what this forces you to do is go through and complete all of these schedules. And so each schedule gives you an opportunity to record information that's and assets or liabilities that are just for the farm or just for you as a person, your personal, or that might be, for you and your spouse or your family. And so you have a chance to record the information for the farm and ranch business and for you personally. By doing that, then we're able to generate those three types of balance sheets. And so again, it's a series of schedules. You go through and fill these out. You include the information, and then those numbers are transferred then to the balance sheet. The thing I really like about this approach is it forces you to make sure that you've included all the assets and liabilities. If you do a good job going through each one of these schedules, you're going to have a very good, complete balance sheet. Now, there may be some schedules that don't pertain to you, and if that's the case, obviously, you just leave those blank. But I think it's an excellent way for you to organize your information. The other thing that I think is very helpful for each schedule is you'll notice in the blue box to the right, we have some instructions. Why is this information important, and where do you get it? How do you record it? And so again, very intuitive. We provide a lot of help information on each page to help lead you through the process. So then once you've gone through each one of those schedules, then you will have a balance sheet. And so here's an example of a balance sheet. Obviously in this screenshot, we've not put anything into the schedules, but as you can see, as we put information in the schedules, it would populate those value columns, and it actually tells you where that information came from. What schedule would you have to go to find that information? So the balance sheet itself summarizes the information and puts it in one place. It also provides you with some pretty important information at the bottom. It actually calculates a current ratio, which would be the ratio between the amount of current assets you have versus your current liabilities. And so basically what we're looking at is for every dollar of liabilities, how many dollars of assets do we have to pay for those? It also comes up with a calculation of working capital, which is that total available cash that you have that you could liquidate if you needed to in a short period of time to pay primarily the bills due within 1 year. Also provides you with debt to asset and debt to equity. And again, those are some pretty important pieces of information. So you could either take this balance sheet and take the information that's important from it, that's required or requested on your loan application and transfer that. Or it may be a situation where a lender might say, you know, rather than filling out the application, just give me a balance sheet. And so you would have that information ready to go. I'm going to stop at that point, Christine, and just ask if there are any questions related to balance sheets before we go on.
We don't have anything in the chat at this point, Brent, so I would say you're good to go.
Okay, we'll keep moving on. So the next thing we want to talk about is an income statement. And again, it's just a profit summary for the business. It might be called an income statement, profit and loss statement, operating statement. It's really used to measure the net return of a firm's production over a specified accounting period. And most likely for most agricultural businesses, it's a calendar year. So it differs from a balance sheet. As I mentioned, consider the balance sheet to be your annual checkup. So typically a balance sheet is pretty much just accurate the day you put it together. You know, the day after you could buy something, you could sell something, and it's going to change that balance sheet. Where the income statement, again, is a summary of your economic events over a specified time period, and again, most likely a year. A couple of uses of an income statement, as I mentioned, if you've got an existing business and you want to expand that business, typically you're going to pull information from an income statement to put on a loan application. Or a lender may simply say, you know, if you've got an income statement, provide that in lieu of a loan application. So that's one use of it. A second use would be what I mentioned earlier, what we call a pro forma or a future income statement. And that's what you would project the income that your business would produce maybe next year, the year after, or 3 years. A lot of lenders, if you're making a major expansion of a business, may want you to put together income statements for the next 3 years. And so a couple of different ways that you can utilize information from an income statement. Just as I mentioned with the balance sheet, the income statement starts with an input page where you put some dates in, the starting and ending date of the period, the name of the business, and again, an opportunity for you to determine what your legal entity is. And as you look over to the right-hand side again, you'll see that very helpful information box to help you fill this out. if you look at the bottom, then you see the individual Excel sheets, the income statement itself, a place to put cash receipts, cash expenses and depreciation, capital sales and purchases, and so forth. And it works, again, just like the balance sheet, in that the income statement does not allow you to directly put information on that. You put it in the other Excel sheets, and that information then is used to populate the income statement. So here's an example of one of those sheets where you would indicate your cash receipts or income. And again, the blue boxes give you information on what's required, what kind of what you need in order to complete that particular spreadsheet. And then again, that information would be then compiled into that income statement. So this income statement, again, could be looking back. It could be a summary of the year that you just completed. Maybe you've summarize your records and you have the data. And so this is what the income statement was for the year 2021. But again, it could also be put together looking forward as a projected income statement, especially if you're looking to establish or you're looking to expand an existing business. Questions about income statements before we move on? Okay, we'll keep going. So the final one we want to talk about tonight, and I have to tell you, this is one of my favorite statements, the cash flow statement. And in fact, I just completed one of these a couple evenings ago for my three partners in our farming business, my wife, my son, and my daughter-in-law. We're very concerned, as probably most people in production agriculture are at this point, that a lot of our input prices have just skyrocketed. So I put together a pro forma cash flow, a forward-looking cash flow for 2023, and I inputted into that, or added into it, what I think our input prices are going to be. What do we anticipate the price of fertilizer to be, diesel fuel, interest rates. And so what we were able to do with that is come up with a cost of production on a per unit basis. So we have an estimate of what we think it will cost us in 2023 to produce a bushel of corn, which is very valuable information, because that tells us, well, in order to make a profit, we've got to sell it at a price higher than cost of production. So I really like cash flow statements. We do a lot of work with them, and I think it's an essential thing for a business to put together. So basically, the cash flow statement summarizes all the cash inflows and all of the expenditures over a specific time. And again, it's usually a year, and we divide those expenses into 12 monthly periods as we put together the cash flow. Again, we can do a long-range projection, a forecast of future operations. We've been using this term pro forma throughout the presentation. It's a great planning tool. Or we can do an historical after the fact based on our records containing the actual financial data from a previous year. I highly recommend to people looking to make a major expansion or change in your business, or if you're looking to start a new business, consider doing 3 pro forma cash flow statements. And again, with this Excel spreadsheet that I'm going to show you, it makes that quite easy to do. It makes it very manageable. So again, the format that you're accustomed to with the other statements, we have this input page. A couple of neat things about this. In addition to the basic information, the name of the business, the legal entity, who's the primary contact, which is typically the person that completed the cash flow, and again, what year is this being projected. Some other really cool functions. One is it allows you to put in what your beginning checking account balance would be, that account that you use for that farm or ranch business. And then the next thing is, what's your minimum desired amount you want to have in that account at the end of each month? maybe you can get a free checking account with your bank as long as you don't draw the balance down below $500. And so that may be our limit. We can also put in what the interest rate would be for an operating loan. And then if we're carrying over a loan balance from a previous year, an operating loan balance, we can also include that. And so what that allows us to do is kind of keep a running total of what that operating line balance would be. So this one works kind of in a little different fashion. It's a little difficult for you to see on the screen right here, but if you could see this better, what you would find out are the zeros in that total column on the far left side. Those are all black and those are all protected. You can't enter anything into those cells. And then the cells for each of the months is blue. And so that's where you enter the information. So you enter the income and expenses on a per month basis, and then you get a total column. So in this shot, we see the different sources of income, crop sales, animal sales, other types of income, if you do custom work, if you're expecting some USDA payments, interest, if crop insurance. Then we also have some other operating receipts if we plan on making some capital sales. Maybe we're going to sell some land we own or some breeding stock or some machinery. And it also allows us to incorporate and track non-farm income, such as wages, interest, and dividends. And so this might be really important if we're trying to get a business established and initially we're not going to make enough profits for the business to thrive on its own. Maybe we have to subsidize it with some non-farm income. And this cash flow statement allows us to capture that. Then we take a look at the expenses. You can see those are pretty extensive. We have a series for crops, for livestock, other things that aren't really, directly crop or livestock based. Please notice there's several spaces that in that far left-hand column that are open. So you can add other items that you don't see on the list that are important to your particular operation. And then we can also put loan payments, real estate loans, machinery, equipment, any short-term debt, a couple places for other debt. If we have other cash flows, say we're going to maybe track the fact that our family budget is $4,500 a month. Well, we can put that in and track it as well. And so what's really neat about this is then we get to the bottom here, we have our total cash outflows, the net of the cash flows, either positive or negative. And then the last section is one I think is very, very helpful. This takes into account your cash position and your operating loan. And so this allows us to project a couple of very important things. One, what is the maximum outstanding loan balance we have for an operating loan? That's really important because that gives us an idea how much money we need to borrow in that operating loan. What is that maximum amount we need to make sure that we have secured as we work through our ag lender? By putting the interest rate we're charged for that operating loan in the input page, this also calculates the amount of interest we'll pay on a monthly basis, and then the accrued interest until we pay it. And so that's very helpful. We might find that we're really spending a lot of money on operating because we don't have income coming in other times of the year. So maybe we adjust our production cycle and maybe we have some income coming in at a different time of the year that reduces our operating loan balance and interest. Or maybe we change when we make loan payments. Maybe we have an opportunity to change that machinery and equipment loan from June to December. And by doing that, we cash flow better and we're spending less money in operating interest. And so again, what's really cool about this is we can just make a couple of changes and do what if scenarios to the chicken's roost, which again is really a nice thing about all three of these It allows us to make a few changes. The Excel spreadsheet does the calculations on its own, and we can see the bottom line effect of all kinds of different changes we might want to contemplate. Before I go on, again, Christine, just a quick opportunity for anyone that might have some specific questions about cash flows.
Yeah, nothing posted, Brent.
Okay, thank you. So I just want to leave you with the 4 C's of ag lending, and it could be the 4 C's of ag borrowing. But just to talk about these are 4 things that ag lenders look at as they evaluate a loan package. The first one is capacity. And what that really means is what's your ability to borrow money? What kind of assets do you have? Do you have enough cash coming in to pay all of your current bills throughout the year and a little cushion? Now that capacity part of this equation may change a little bit. Certainly, if you are in a beginning farmer rancher program, if you're utilizing the microloan program with Farm Service Agency, they don't put as much emphasis on capacity as maybe a commercial lender might, because they've designed those programs specifically for people who may not have a lot of assets and may have a limited capacity to borrow money. The second C is credit. And this is important regardless of the type of loan or the lending institution that you're working with. You've got to have good credit. And so I really stress this with young people. Do everything you can to establish and maintain good credit from day one. Pay your bills on time. Don't overextend yourself. Your credit is very, very important, and it can be a great hindrance to you if it's not good and you're looking to borrow money for a small business, to start your own business. Collateral is another one that's important. Again, the 2 loan programs that I mentioned are very liberal as it relates to the collateral part of the equation. Certainly they're going to want to have the ability to repossess anything you buy with the proceeds of the loan. But unlike many commercial loan lenders, they'll loan you 100% of the value of your collateral. And then the final one, and probably should be at the top of the list, and that's character. And really what we're talking about here is simply put, say what you mean and mean what you say. Be honest with your lender up front. Start a good, honest relationship with that person and try to maintain that high level of character throughout. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and close. I provided my contact information. If I can be of assistance in the future, please feel free to let me know. And Christine, thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to be a part of the program this evening.
Yeah, Brent, quick question for you. As far as, especially for younger producers and stuff, can you just briefly mention about the importance of record keeping and maybe what they need to keep for records and how long?
Yeah, very good question. What I tell people is you need to have an accounting package. There are a lot of good ones out there that are computer-based, which makes things very easy. I tell people, Quicken and QuickBooks work quite well. In fact, we use Quicken for our own farm, and we have for about 15 years. Now, there's some people that say, Quicken's not sophisticated enough for agriculture. I don't agree with that. I think it works quite well. The thing I like about Quicken is it's very inexpensive. It's easy to get a hold of, and it's easy to understand. Quicken is really based on the premise of a checkbook. And so if you can keep a checkbook register, Quicken makes sense. Now, having said that, it was designed for personal finance. And so if you want to use Quicken, Oklahoma State University has some really good resources to help you modify Quicken and make it a great ag accounting software package. So the first thing is just a really good set of records, computerized if you can do that. But if nothing else, hand kept ledger system still works well. The second thing that's really important with a record keeping system is you need to have an ability to allocate the expenses by enterprise. And so, in the example for tonight, for example, if you had both an egg enterprise and a broiler enterprise, you need to be able to allocate the income and expenses based on each one of those enterprises. And the reason that's so very important is you may look at your overall operation and you may be quite profitable and you're pretty happy with it. But what I find is when I help people do enterprise analysis, very often we'll find one enterprise in the mix that's actually losing money. And it may have been losing money for years and they just don't know it because they're just looking at the big picture and not each enterprise individually. And so when we find that underperforming enterprise, then we can either make changes to make it more profitable, or in some cases we're able to look at it and say, there's nothing we can really do to make that profitable. If we would just quit that enterprise and maybe take those resources and apply them somewhere else, would actually make more profit. So a good record keeping system and the ability to allocate income and expenses to your various enterprises, I think, are the two most important.